Let me introduce you to our panelists today. Rebecca Henderson is the CEO and Executive Board Member of Randstad, a company that very much has its finger on the pulse when it comes to the labour force internationally. Harry Moseley is the Global Co-Chief Information Officer at Zoom. I'm sure many of you in the room are intimate with Zoom after the last 12 to 18 months. You can blame him. Alan Blue joins us, co-founder of LinkedIn, also a site that I'm sure many people, given the changing of jobs and circumstances that I've interacted with recently. Thank you all so much for joining us here in the church. I want to kick it off by talking about the outlook for the labour market. We heard from Jay Powell over at the Fed recently indicating that the unemployment rate, consistent with stable inflation, is probably well over 3.6%. In plain speak, the unemployment rate has to go up. The casualty really has to be workers here. First up, if I can just turn to you, Rebecca, what do you think the outlook for the workforce looks like in coming months, given we're talking about potential for recession amid higher inflation and interest rates?
Well, we've definitely heard the potential of a slowdown, and hopefully that's a softer landing. But what we have just gone through with this rapid rise in going back to work, highly skilled workers, the competition for the highest skills, these people have just recently changed jobs. And from my vantage point right now, companies, employers are investing in these individuals, not necessarily laying them off. You go through a lot of time and effort to recruit these individuals. And again, companies are still facing shortages in skills. And I think those skills will be important to the growth of those companies going forward, even if growth is slower.
Harry, if I can come to you and take a look at this through your lens, a unique perspective you've had on the labour force in recent months, what do you see down the track?
Yeah, so it's, what we've gone through in the last 2.5 years has been, a radical change in literally every industry around the world, whether it's financial services, professional services, healthcare, education. Now both employees and employers have got a radically different view on recruiting people. They can recruit nationally. They can recruit geographically, be agnostic from a geographic perspective. And employees are sort of looking for that flexibility in where they work, looking for that flexibility about when they work, looking for what's the mission of this company? What is the purpose of this company? It's not just about my role at the company, but it's like, I want to work for a company where it's a meaningful role and a meaningful organization.
If I can turn to you, if you think about your company in particular, you see the postings from the employers, you see the applicants looking for new positions and how much they're clicking on particular job offers and what's of interest. So, Alan, what do you think the next 12 months holds, given the changing and, should I use the word, challenging economic environment now?
Well, it's interesting. So we are doing our best to build a system which is going to help individuals be resilient to whatever change actually comes down the line. We do pay attention to what they're doing as well, to try to understand the kinds of ways in which we can guide employers to be more successful. So one thing, for instance, when we look at the various age groups, the various generations of people who are working in the workforce today, we find that millennials, the youngest generation in the workforce today, are actually the least interested among those generations in fully remote work. And a big part of that reason is that they need to find a way to come back together with other people who they can learn from. They are missing the ability to build networks. They're missing the ability to learn from other people and more senior people. And I think this is just one sign that changes in the labor market and the demand for skills and labor is only one component of the changes we're going to see in the next 12 months.
You've both come at it from a perspective of the type of work, the type of interaction, whether it's work from home, work from work, hybrid, the resignations. That's been a very big conversation post-pandemic. But it does have this luxury that the worker is in a negotiating position. And we know when conditions change, and we've seen recessions before, workers don't have the same luxury. Suddenly job security is foremost in their minds. Is this starting to change, Alan?
So I think so. When I look at companies, they generally speaking have a very diverse workforce in this particular sense, although we should talk about diversity. But they have a diverse workforce in the sense that they have some people who are working on jobs which are going to be in demand no matter what the economic circumstances. And they have some who may be more susceptible to changes depending on the relative demand for labor. So for instance, if you have software engineers in your company, and many companies do because we're all kind of becoming technology companies, those software engineers are going to be no less in demand in a recession than they are today. So that means that companies are going to continue to have a group of their employees who are basically saying, we want to be able to work hybrid, we want to be able to work remote. And that's voices that the company has to listen to.
Harry, if I can continue on this. I mean, we've just heard today that Snap is the latest technology company to cut back its workforce that's growing too rapidly. It needs to make some cuts to try and salvage profitability. What do you say to that for a tech industry that's been growing so quickly?
Yeah, well, I think it goes to exactly what Alan was talking about. Sort of it's the hybrid work model. It's employees and millennials in particular really want to spend some time in the office and some time not in the office. They really do value sort of the mentorship and learnings that they can get, but they also want that flexibility in their personal and professional lives. I mean, one of my colleagues, this is just an example. She and her husband had a new child during the pandemic, and they were working remote, and it was great that she and her husband were able to parent the child. And she's going to continue to work on a remote basis, and she can be a real parent. I was just saying to you before, Karen, it's like, when I had young children at home, I would be in my office at 7 a.m. in the morning. My God, it's like how my life and my children could actually have been different if I was working had the ability to work in a virtual environment.
Rebecca, we've just had a sea change with the pandemic that has completely altered the entire workforce. But another sea change could be coming if it's a recession, much tighter conditions. The conversations we're having around flexibility, do you think they hold up down the track?
I do think they hold up for a variety of reasons. And one, we've proven that we can work remotely. I don't think there's a company that has said a dramatic reduction in productivity as a result of working remotely. So I think at least the data and our surveys have showed 40+% of people won't even consider a job now unless it's remote. I think the employer, back to the conversation earlier, the employee, still has a lot of power in where they choose to work. They're highly skilled. It's a different conversation for our lower skilled workforce. I think the other...
We're just going to give you a different microphone, I believe. Yes.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, much better, I think.
Do you want me to start over?
Yes, please.
Where I was going is the worker, I still think, is powerful in the negotiation. Our data suggests more than 40% of individuals will not switch jobs unless they can continue in a flexible environment. And we haven't had a loss in productivity. I believe that those things all still hold true. And
apologies, we are really suffering with your microphone there. Third time lucky, perhaps.
Do you want to
try
speak
that
in
one?
is that better?
No?
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
No.
now they turned
Now
it
we have
on.
comms.
That helps. All right,
Let's take that from the top.
back from the top.
Third time's the charm,
Well,
right?
That's right. Maybe you guys can remind me what I said.
Yeah.
This is just like a Zoom call. Your microphone's not on.
Yes, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Careful now, careful
You
now,
did this
careful
here.
now.
I believe, in fact, that employees will continue to have a lot of power in where they choose to go to work, and they will demand flexibility. More than 40% of workers that we survey say they won't take a job unless it has that level of flexibility. We haven't seen big decreases in productivity. I don't think we will. And the highly skilled workers will continue to choose where they want to go and who they want to work for based on that. I think it's here to stay. One thing that both that Harry mentioned and Alan, also, there's still a skill shortage. And you now have a wider net in terms of where these individuals are. And they all can't come to the office. They won't be able to travel to a local office. And that'll also, as long as that skill shortage is here and until we can, get everybody trained up to where we need them to, we'll continue to have flexibility.
PwC said to me moments ago that the resignation in the skilled area of the economy will continue because of platforms like LinkedIn, that you are helping connect people up to the availability of jobs. It's those that are in the lowest skilled area of the economy that may suffer if the economic conditions change. Do you think that is the case, that you're helping out parts of the population, but not others? And is there a role for you to think more broadly about connecting even those with fewer skills?
Indeed. So as far as what will happen, I do not know. I do know, however, that when we think about skills, and we're thinking about people who we call low skill, which is probably an unfair term, but when we think about somebody who doesn't have like a large body of technical skills, if they have worked, they have a large body of soft skills which make the work they do and their capability to do work transferable. So if, for instance, and we always use this example, if you're a bartender, you have 70% of the skills already to work in a customer service call center. And those 30% of additional skills are technical skills, and they're much easier to learn than, because you can do it remotely, you can do it online, as opposed to the soft skills, which almost always have to be developed in the workplace. So just because someone is working in a lower skilled job doesn't mean that they don't have substantial mobility to move upwards, so long as they have support from other people and they have the ability to get that training.
I want to switch the conversation slightly, Harry, because I know a lot of people in the room want to know how much time they're going to spend in front of a phone or computer having a video conferencing call, whether it's with Zoom or one of your rivals. What can you say? What's the time we're going to spend with Zoom and your rivals from here?
Yeah, great question. And there's no easy answer to that. We've heard about sort of the notion of fatigue. It's not necessarily associated with our platform. I think it's fatigue, generally speaking. In days, in the pre-pandemic world, if you went into your office at 7 a.m. in the morning and you had 14 1.5-hour meetings back to back from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., I don't think you'd make it, right? You wouldn't make it till 7 o'clock. You'd be exhausted early afternoon. So I think that it sort of comes down to people putting controls around their time. So that's sort of one. Two is taking breaks. There was a lot of studies during the pandemic about sort of recommendations. Turn off the video. Why would I want to do that? I have a very different opinion on this. I'd rather see you, Karen, because if I'm pitching you, if I'm selling to you, if I have an idea, and I want to see that body language. I want to see the head nod. I want to see the smiles. I want to see the grimace, because that tells me a lot of things. So I think that's a second. And my other point on this is that, if I'm making a dinner reservation, I don't need to see the maitre d'. I can do that with a phone call. A lot of recommendations are, sort of get up and go for a walk and take your phone with you and do a phone call. I completely disagree with that too. I think you should get up and go for a walk, take the dog, leave the digital devices behind, take a break, allow the brain to reset, because if you're just going back to back, you can't function. So there's no easy answer. I personally, sorry about the mic there. I personally prefer to see people when I'm talking to them about business, because that way it's much more engaging, and what could have been a 30-minute conversation collapsed down to 15 minutes, because if I see you nodding, you're in agreement. That's good. If I see you shaking, means I need to go slower and be more articulate.
Rebecca, what do you think? I mean, we're talking about a company that was viewed as a pandemic company, a pandemic stock on the stock market, and that if we went back to work, we would stop using services like Zoom. But that just didn't happen. In fact, it was quite useful to have Zoom, even connecting up with colleagues in the office, whether they are in the one spot or whether they're in offices elsewhere across the world or across the country. What do you think the future is of using services, video conferencing services like this?
Well, I was saying to Harry in the green room, we're a Google shop, we're still using video chat every day. So for us,
That'll change.
we already had it institutionalized, but overnight we went from having phone calls to doing everything video, and I can't imagine. We have 40,000 people in 40 countries around the world. I cannot imagine talking to my colleagues on the telephone anymore. It just doesn't happen. But I will tell you that, and in particular for women, it puts an added pressure, because if you were working remotely in the past, you had your baseball cap and your ponytail, and that was okay. And now there's a new pressure to get dressed up or fix your hair or do what you want to do. Some of the best practices that we've installed, I know all during the pandemic, I wore a T-shirt just as a leader to set an example that you didn't have to come to the call dressed a certain way and add more pressure to ourselves. So I think there's a level of casualness that has arrived. There's also a level of intimacy that happens. Everybody knows what my home office looks like now. The pictures of my children, my husband skiing, all of those things. And I can see that. I've met my colleagues' children who have just accidentally walked in. My daughter has a great example. She works for Cisco, and for her group, the son of the head of engineering and her son have become friends, just by having that chat available. If that level of humanity, I think people enjoy that. I don't think that will go away.
Alan, come in.
So one of the things that we're trying to work out today at LinkedIn is exactly what that remote or hybrid workplace looks like for us. And I think this is actually a challenge that a lot of companies have right now, because they're trying to be clear and send clear signals to their employees about what's it going to be like to work in this place. And I entirely understand that. But I think one of the things that we as leaders need to do is leave some space for us to develop the new hybrid environment that we want to work in, so that we can find the thing which works well for us as a company. I think every company is going to come down at a different place, which is unique to their culture, to the way they want to build teams, to the work that they do. Of course, there are some businesses which are always in person, so they may have many fewer choices to make. But we still have a lot to learn about living in a hybrid environment. And the pandemic put us there. Let's give ourselves some time to figure it out. We don't have to know tomorrow.
What can you say about the rules of engagement? Because the conversation we just had was that, you've got to know when to switch off the device, or not to put yourself on camera, to use voice. And it feels as though we're now entering an environment where there's work from work, work from home, work both at ends of the day in both places. There's no switch off. There's a level of fatigue almost coming into the mix. Yep. What do you say then about the rules of engagement for workers?
Well, so I think your example of executives setting examples for how the workplace should operate is incredibly important. Without those examples, it's very hard to do. So that's a key tactic to deploy no matter what you're setting. One of the things we discovered at LinkedIn is that no meeting days are actually very useful to give some change to the rhythm.
So a complete ban on meetings for a whole day,
meetings,
24 hours.
Whole day, exactly. Second, agreements on teams of when the shut-off time actually is. And at that point, the leaders of those teams must stop acting.
What's okay in terms of a shut-off time? What are we talking, 5 p.m. close of business, 6 p.m.?
So it depends on the team. So sometimes teams are spread over multiple time zones. One of the things which is both a good thing and also a challenge from a management perspective. So it may be later, but the important thing is that there's an expectation set within the group of when that day ends, so that they know when they can shut off and do so safely. And not that there's real danger, but if your boss is there, you feel like you need to be there. And so it's important for your boss to not be there.
It's a different type of FaceTime, isn't it? Harry, you want to come in?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there that sort of floated past I wanted to comment on. First off, there was an article in a New York newspaper, I think it was like April or May of 2020, and the headline was, "Social distancing, you must be joking." I never thought I would know so much about my colleagues I'm in their homes, I'm in their kitchens, I'm in their living rooms, dining rooms, bedrooms. I've been in bathrooms. I've met their parents, I've met their grandparents, I've met their kids, I've met their dogs, their cats, I've met snakes. And I think what this has done, to your point, which is, it really has brought the teams together dramatically. So I think that's really important. Because we're humans at the end of the day. We've all got red blood and we've all got sort of challenges. And I think that bringing teams together like this makes it much easier to communicate. So two is, sort of the notion of the office. The big question that I think companies have now begun to realize globally is like, what is the purpose of the office? Mm-hmm. Certainly in the knowledge space, right? For essential workers, it's dramatically different. For us who are privileged in the knowledge space, it's what is the purpose of the office, which sort of folds then into the hybrid model. And many companies have come to the conclusion that the purpose of the office is where people come together to work together on a particular activity, and then they can go away to do their individual work wherever. So I think this hybrid model is going to be sort of super important. Yeah.
Rebecca, I want to ask the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? I'm not asking you that directly because that is the most asked question to future employees by an employer. But recently, there's been a conversation point about whether this should be flipped, whether it's the future employee that should be asking the employer where they see themselves in 5 years' time as an organization. Just talk to us about that concept, but also how employers make themselves attractive to future workers in an environment where there's a skill shortage.
Yeah. And I had this conversation with a CHRO this morning. The one thing that it becomes difficult to do, particularly if you're even recruiting remotely, is to be able to show the passion that an individual has for their company and to show their culture. Culture has always been important. Culture will become even more important, particularly as there are more social events that take place and companies show up, right? So as an organization, if you're showing up for a social event and it's a cause that's important to you, you may decide to go to work for that company because of that. So understanding the social causes of an organization, where they're investing their dollars and their time socially, I would even add some of the sustainability standards, but that's even becoming almost table stakes.
So purpose matters, but how far do you take that? Do you stray into politics as well?
I was at a luncheon yesterday where a politician was asked about a certain topic that's going on in the U.S., and he told all the CEOs in the room, don't touch that topic because you cannot win. And I think there are topics that are more polarizing that you would stray away from. But there, in the U.S., the racial divide, the topics around race, gender, and diversity, I don't believe those are taboo or as polarizing as they once were. And I think your employees will want you to take a stand, and they'll decide where they work based on that.
Harry, do you want to jump in on this topic about how you make yourself attractive to would-be workers, future workers?
Yeah, I think it sort of comes down to sort of like, what's the purpose, what's the mission, what's this company all about, what's the culture like? We've practiced really hard at Zoom to have an open culture, be very transparent. We have like bi-weekly all-hands meetings for every employee around the company. And when we went into COVID, just to put things in perspective, we were at 2,500 employees. As of January, we were like almost 3 times that, 6,800. And so maintaining that sort of communication, that open channel from the executive team down to every employee globally is like super important. And I think that makes, for a great company and makes it attractive. I do think that young adults, millennials today, I'd be interested in both your perspectives on this one. Compensation, yes, it's important. Benefits, yes, it's important. Work-life balance, more important. Mm-hmm. Purpose of the company, more important. So I think compensation is probably here, benefits is here, and these other topics are higher. That's kind of like what I'm hearing, but,
Yeah, so I think Silicon Valley, so obviously we're based in Silicon Valley, we have a bit of a head start when understanding like how to make our company attractive. because we've been hiring engineers for a really long time. And engineers, when they come into a company, basically have kind of three big questions. One, compensation is not one of them because the competition is so fierce for engineers that compensation is usually not an issue. But the three big ones are, am I going to work on something I care about? Am I going to be working on interesting problems? So things where I'm going to learn something, we're going to be trying something new, and am I going to be working with great people? Those three things, basically, if all of them are true, or but basically I see the right answers in those places for me, then there's a really strong chance that person's going to be attracted to the company. Where we are today is because the labor shortage is where it is, not everywhere in the world. Basically, all companies need to learn that lesson and learn it fast. And I think those three things might act as a valuable guide because it actually can be a balance of the three. Because in some cases, you may be working on something where you can't talk so much about your vision and your mission. But if you're working with great people and on interesting projects, that might be enough.
And let's use it.
I just want to jump in on that. You are so right on that. Because my younger son is an engineer. And when he graduated, he was being, interviewed by a tech company, and for 3 hours. And then I called him and said, "Well, how'd the interview go?" He said, "That doesn't matter what sort of job they offer me. I will never work for this company." And why? He said, "In 3 hours, they didn't ask me anything about me. They didn't want to know about me. They didn't care about me, what my hobbies are, what my interests are, what it's like, nothing about me. They just want me to program. If they could hire a robot to do my job, they would." Wasn't LinkedIn.
The one thing I would add is the definition of benefits. I agree that benefits is up there above the comp. However, the definition of benefits, paternity leave and maternity leave, right? Sabbaticals, career pathing, and investing in education. So I think that where benefits was how much vacation do I get and what's my medical plan. Again, those are table stakes, long vacations, et cetera. But benefits now mean something different to employees.
Yeah.
We've got about 2 minutes left, so about 30 seconds each. Best advice for an employee, how do they maximize their opportunities in the workforce from here? Just 30 seconds each.
Yeah, I'll start, and my message is maybe more to the women in the workforce today, is negotiate, ask. You're still in a very strong negotiating position, particularly skilled workers, and my best advice is to be very upfront with what you want and ask for it.
Harry?
Yeah, well, everything that Karen said, obviously, and be passionate, be purposeful, be enthusiastic, and take a risk. Taking a risk is like, I am in the role that I'm at Zoom because of my, risks that I took much earlier in my career, and don't be intimidated.
So maybe it's the obvious thing for someone from LinkedIn to say, but meet people, help other people. One of the things which is probably the surest mechanism for building flexibility and opportunity for you as an individual professional is to build a network of people around you, people who you help without any expectation of return, people you help. You will love helping those people. It will be great. You will enjoy every minute of it, I swear. And you're going to build a group of connections and relationships which are going to surround you with opportunity.
Yeah. I call what you just described as my personal board, and I have a personal board. These are advisors that I will ping, ask them questions, etc. So have your own personal board. Friends, colleagues, people that can guide you.
What a terrific conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Rebecca, Harry, Alan, we appreciate your conversation points here and for discussing the future of work with us here at the Sanctuary in Davos.
Thank you.